Hey guys, so today we're going to talk a little bit about JavaScript, learning JavaScript, and basically some thoughts I have as to why you might find it to be so difficult, or at least why you may find a lot of people out there in the world who hates that platform. Let's get into it. So first and foremost, I will argue something, and I will argue that the main reason why most people don't like JavaScript has not so much to do with JavaScript itself as it has to do with the browser. Now, what do I mean by that? You see, when I was first learning JavaScript, I, as many people, went through the same type of learning curve, and it usually starts out this way. It starts out by you understanding that this is a browser language, it's something that is specific to the browser environment. Back in those days it was the case anyway. And when you start working with it, you kind of first go, wow, this is pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, because the language isn't all that big, right? And then you get up to a little bit of scale and you start to realize that, oh shit, there's all these issues with manipulating the DOM, there's all these inconsistencies between browsers, there's all this problem managing state and like re-rendering component and all of this, and everything is in global namespace, right? That's also horrible because you have all these collisions. All these problems starts to pile up once you get to a certain size of application. And then you go down one of two routes. And most people that I talk to who are real JavaScript naysayers go down the first route, which is that they just decide that they don't like the language, and then they kind of decide that, hey, this is not worth my time, or like I'm going to use something nicer, etc., etc. And they become what I call naysayers. And then you have the people who go down the other route, and I'm one of those people who you kind of just muscle through it until you get to a point where you feel very comfortable in the language. You kind of learn all the quirks and you learn how the different things work. Now, I will argue that this is a much healthier approach to things, because I personally argue that if you dismiss something because you can't handle it, then you are the limitation. Like, I'm not saying that, I'm saying that if you can dismiss something that's just a bad idea, then that's great. But JavaScript is, unfortunately, it doesn't matter if you think it's a good idea or a bad idea, it's here to stay. It's the language of the browser. You're just going to have to deal with it. So you can either complain about it or you can get busy and learn it. Those are your options, right? Or your third option is that you simply work in a place where somebody else has taken the time to get good at it. So, in my personal experience, what usually is the issue with JavaScript is not the language itself. I mean, yes, you can make an argument that something that is loosely typed isn't all that nice, but I mean, PHP is loosely typed. Why aren't people complaining as much about PHP or Python or Ruby or any of these other languages that have a loose typing system? I mean, if you work in Node, none of these issues that I was describing earlier, and this is kind of where this is what I want to say with this video. My argument is that if you work in server-side Node, that's actually, in my opinion, a fairly nice experience. I mean, it's, in my personal opinion, who's been doing like PHP. To me, Node.js and like doing server-side JavaScript is a much nicer development experience than what I personally think that PHP is. Now, PHP isn't bad, it's just my personal preference, and I don't really see the big difference. There's no, in my personal opinion, there's much more ugliness, if you will, quote unquote, in the PHP language. Like, there's all these legacy functions, and there's all, like, it's basically a massive library of different functions. So, pros and cons, right? PHP is great for other stuff, right? But the thing that people, in my personal opinion, usually talk about when they talk about JavaScript being this horrible, horrible thing, it's not actually JavaScript itself that is the issue. It is the way that the DOM is structured. It's the way that the interaction between JavaScript and the browser DOM works. That's just how I look at it. I mean, you think about it yourself. What language wouldn't be absolutely horrible if they had to deal with the DOM? If you had to have this sort of interface, this interaction that we're talking about with like this external, basically like this external structure that you need to mutate, because the DOM is just one big state, and you need to externally with JavaScript mutate that in order to put it in a state that you want it to be. If you really think about it, this is how I think about it, if you really get down to it, that is very much or very close to the same sort of issues that people complain about when they talk about having mutatable singletons. If you have a singleton with a mutatable state and you have a bunch of code that is mutating that state left and right depending on different execution times, that's the same problem. In essence, the same sort of issue, albeit, let's be honest, with a lot more functionality. But if you think about it, that extra functionality, it's kind of not natural that that's there, because you're showing something to users. The DOM is representing something to users. A data structure, a singleton in memory, does not show anything. It's an easier data structure to work with. The DOM is a very complicated data structure to work with. And if you think about that, all these inconsistencies, all these APIs, all of that stuff, that's the browser. It's not JavaScript, it's the browser. There are absolutely weird stuff that's going on in the language as well, but I think that we need to be a little bit honest here, because that's how I felt about it. I mean, even to this day, I think that working in Node.js is one of the fastest ways for me to get productive. I really like it. I'm not saying that it's right for really, really large project. There's all kinds of considerations you have to make. But if I ever have a problem with JavaScript, it's sure as hell not in Node.js. It's usually an issue with the browser. I have to this day never felt, in all the years I've worked so far, I've never felt that JavaScript as a language is the issue. The issue is, as I said, the interaction between JavaScript and the DOM. And I don't think it's fair to blame the language for this kind of weird interaction that exists in the browser. So, to summarize, my personal opinion, and what I argue that you should kind of consider when you're trying to get into JavaScript and so forth, is that the language itself is very simple. If you start doing JavaScript in Node, you're most likely going to find that the language, you're going to pick up the language very quickly, and it's going to be fairly straightforward for you to learn it. It will take you a very short amount of time. The stuff that is going to take you time to develop experience and learn all the quirks and the oddities that are existing, it's going to happen in the browser. That's the browser that is going to be your issue. That's where it takes a lot of experience to get the architecture right and to know what to do and what to avoid. That's what's going to come with experience. But don't let anybody tell you that just JavaScript, plain old JavaScript in Node, is this horrible development experience, because it's not. It's pretty gosh darn awesome, if you ask me. So that's what I'm going to end with, and I hope that I've relayed this idea I have, that we have to make a distinction on what's the issue, what the issue actually is. And my distinction is JavaScript is not the issue. It's the interaction between JavaScript and the DOM. If anybody is to blame, it's the browser's DOM that is the problem area. Have a great day.